never and ever. Life is now or never, forever never comes around.
The next frame in my mini quad shootout build is this BoltRC Bolt210 race. It's the only one I believe in my shootout that has a monoplate or monocoque design. So it's a single 4mm carbon fibre base plate. The carbon fibre is, it seems like very high quality carbon fibre, and the machining on it is impeccable. And I've noticed it has these slots cut in it that only go about half the depth of the 4mm carbon, so they don't go all the way through. And these are for the camera side plates here, and then for a rear sort of stand-up plate at the back here. And I guess by not going all the way through, they serve the purpose of holding something in position, but don't affect the strength of the frame in a way they don't need to by cutting all the way through. Then we have some extra little pieces here. This is the rear stand or plate. We have some camera side plates here, and then these two little plates which line up with the top plate to act as what they call bumpers, just to add some extra rigidity and strength, thickness to the top plate at the ends. The top plate is also feels very high quality. It's machining is impeccable, and that's a 1.5mm top plate. It seems very small for a 5-inch quad, really. I'm thinking that this quad probably isn't going to do a great job of carrying a camera. It's probably going to be in the same field as maybe the Krieger in that regard. But anyway, it is high quality carbon fibre components from what I can tell. Also in the kit comes the rest of these items. We have another first for me, titanium standoff screws. So the weight of aluminium but the strength of steel, I guess, best way to describe them. We have these anodised orange aluminium standoffs and some orange anodised washers that go with them. This is all of the nylon hardware that comes with the kit. There's a bunch of different sized nylon screws and some short nylon standoffs for the PDB flight controller. Comes with a little bag of fibre washers. Not sure why you need so many of them, but we might find out during the build. It comes with a perhaps incorrectly labelled battery strap, labelled Bolt250, but yeah, good to see a battery strap in there, although it's not the type that I would prefer to use, and it doesn't have that sort of sticky vinyl side on it that really grabs your battery. And it comes with a small bag of cable ties, a whole bunch of them really, and some medium-sized cable ties and some double-sided tape. I've pre-assembled the frame using the supplied hardware, the aluminium standoffs, titanium screws. It all went together very well. The tolerances are very tight. I did have to very gently file just the tiniest amount of material out of the rear slots here for this rear plate. But I probably could have put a bit of olive oil or something on it and forced it into position, but yeah, it was quite firm on there. Apart from that, just point out that the side plates support the use of the HS1177 camera, so there's no need for any additional hardware to mount that, and that will allow me to swivel or tilt the camera. There's actually two positions for it. I think one of them, the front hole, gives a higher camera angle. This rear plate is quite interesting. I do like the idea of it to, rather than vertically stacking maybe the receiver and video transmitter like I commonly do in a lot of my quads, I can mount them to this plate at the back, which is sort of handy. Something that Luminaire could learn from this with their QAV series frames that have a 1mm top plate and rear overhang. The rear overhang on the Luminaire is a lot more prominent than this, but the idea of this extra little bumper, this extra little piece of carbon fibre plate at the back that sandwiches here, gives this a real thickness of about 3mm. So that prone area at the back there that overhangs, where the VTX pigtail will be attached. It's effectively double thickness, which is nice to see, and the idea of this middle standoff in the middle here. So it's probably stronger with 5 standoffs and this setup than a lot of other frames that even have 6 standoffs, because of the way they've put this one in the middle and got the extra laminate here, the bumpers on the top plate. Anyway, enough about that. The frame measures 150mm left to right motor centres and 150mm front to rear motor centres. So it is a true X frame. The price of the quad was Australian dollars $90, which at today's exchange rate equates to US $68 plus shipping. And now time to weigh it. All of the quads are being weighed in this sort of state with their basic frame hardware, no motor screws. But I am weighing them with a PDB if they don't come with one, because those that do, the Alien and some others, the Martian, it's not fair if I don't include a PDB, which is part of their frame. So first of all, just put it on there without it. And it comes to 94 grams, then a little bit of the nylon hardware to attach the PDB and the PDB itself, and it comes out just over 100 grams at 101 grams. It isn't the most rigid frame I've ever come across, but for the weight of the frame, for a 100 gram frame, I think it stacks up pretty well. And considering that it is sold, well, with the name race in its name, it is sold for that purpose. Keeping the weight low does mean sometimes there has to be a compromise on strength, but I think they've managed to strike the balance really well with this for a monoplate design with these extra bumpers, etc., and the way that everything's laid out, that it is a strong frame for its weight. With the HS1177 mounted in the rear set of holes, the camera range is about 0 to 45 degrees. It's important, if you want the higher angles, that you use a HS1177 with a top mount camera output. And with the camera mounted in the front set of holes, the range of movement is about 45 degrees through to about 60 degrees. I modified the VTX by soldering the pigtail direct to it. Check the description of this video for a link to the how-to video on that process. There's some relatively new aspects to this build for me, including this vertical area at the back here to attach things. So I just wanted to take the time and lay out all my electronics how I wanted it, just to make sure everything fit together. And I really wanted to try and minimise weight on this build. I've got my VTX sitting in here now with its pigtail connected. I've got the receiver on this side just blue tacked in place. That'll need shrink wrap on it, or heat shrink on it first, and ESCs and the LC filter are just blue tacked lightly in place. So I moved the ESCs as far as I could up the arms because they're fatter than the arms, so help try and protect them a bit, and make use of the narrow arms for maximum airflow. The flight controller is prepared, a few pins, header pins stuck on that, and pre-tinned the connectors for the servo leads from the ESCs, and that'll sit on top there. With all the electronics wired up, I connected a battery to test it and found that one of the ESCs is faulty. The LED doesn't light up on it. Pretty much all of the electronics are now in place and connected up. Soldered or pinned. Heat shrink on the ESCs, just got to tape them or zip tie them to the arms. Everything went in pretty easily. It is a tighter build than a lot of quads, and it's a bit deceiving. It's very, very narrow through here, and it's actually relatively short, so plenty of room here in the vertical stack because of the components mounted back here, but not much room between each of the sections. I've mounted the pigtail coming out the side like this, and that's just to make it easier to connect the battery coming in from this side, because at the back these props pass very, very close to these rear stands on the back. So This one will have a side mount connector. Now the battery strap, I commented that I didn't like it because it was the fabric type and it was rolled up. I should have unravelled it. It does have the nice grippy, really grippy silicone or vinyl type coating on it, but it's still too big for this quad, so I'll use one of these relatively generic Luminaire ones. I think they're made by Scorpion actually. So I'll use one of those with it. Before I put the top plate on, I'll take a file and carefully just file the corners of this where the battery strap will pass over to prevent the battery strap from being cut by the sharp corner of the carbon fibre. The roof will go on, the VTX antenna, some props, and it'll be almost ready to fly. There we go, perfect. I've still got a, not quite 90 degrees, but it's close enough, so I've still got my diversity there. The Bolt210 race build is now complete, and now for a quick review and summary of what I found. So first of all, it is a monoplate design. The strength of that, well, it's reasonably stiff. It's 4mm carbon. It's not going to break easily, but I guess a downside of a monoplate is that if you do break an arm, and these are relatively thin in this dimension, if you do break an arm, you're going to have to replace the whole base plate. But I think that's a compromise for the low weight, and that's acceptable for somebody that really wants to have something that goes fast. I do think that this is a better design than, for example, the standard QAVR, which bolts underneath. I think that's more likely to break the base plate than this is to break an arm. The other thing about the design is that it has been very well thought out. They've put these extra little bit of carbon fibre bits around the motors just to help protect them in the case of an accident. While we're looking at this side, I'll point out that the screws aren't supplied with the kit, so I've had to supply my own screws, and the ones that come with the Luminaire motors are for 3mm arms, and so I had to source those, and these are steel ones, so I could save a bit of weight with some aluminium ones, but I didn't have the right size in aluminium. The hardware that does come with it, titanium bolts, which is quite amazing, and these aluminium spacers or washers, anodised orange aluminium spacers that go underneath the heads of the bolts, help spread the load around, so that's really quite a nifty part of the design, I think. I've used a piece of white foam here for the battery pad. It doesn't come with anything to go underneath the battery. This is actually just the foam insert. I'll just cut out a bit of the foam insert that comes in these Eoshine VTX boxes. Works well for that. It's very lightweight, but it's a relatively dense foam, and I've got a screw in the frame in the middle here, so I didn't want that puncturing a battery, so I do need a fairly firm foam for that. While we're talking about VTX, that's another great feature of this frame, is the vertical stand at the back. This VTX, it's like it was designed for it. There's about half a millimetre clearance at the top. I removed the SMA or RP SMA connector and put the pigtail on, and now it fits perfectly under there. I can see the lights at the bottom, which tell me my channel frequency, and I can easily access the button to change channel frequency. So that's really a nice, neat placement of that, and very practical. On the other side, the X4R similarly fits in there with about half a millimetre to spare. This is an X4R, this is the D-pinned or the naked version, and if you D-pinned a regular X4R you'd achieve the same result, and that fits in there with only half a millimetre to spare. I can easily see the status LED and access the little bind button if I need it. Just put a cable tie through the D-loop, and that helps hold the battery cable out of the way of the props once that's mounted on there. Now the other factor or downside of this quad may be that going to be limited option to mount a camera on here, a HD camera. I use a GoPro Session, and I really struggle to see how that might fit. Here's an old busted GoPro Session. So with the battery on there, it's really going to be limited option to mount that on there, and then I'm going to have to get a cable tie or something around it. So it might be easier with a regular GoPro, which is thinner, but I don't think this is really going to be a quad for carrying a HD camera. It really is a racing quad. Let's see how light it is. So the weight of the quad with props, with VTX antenna, it's this little cheap lightweight one, but it's the same for all of them. So weight of the quad comes in at 312 grams without a battery, and when I add a 1300 milliamp hour graphene, which are pretty heavy, but comes in at 487 grams. So that's quite phenomenal. For my 5-inch Kriegers, I normally aim for around a 500 gram weight, and it's difficult to get under that. This is quite phenomenal. This is 15-17 grams lighter than any of my Kriegers, 5-inch Kriegers. So quite an amazing little quad, and can't wait to get out there and fly it.